You have to have a short-term memory as a baseball closer. This is what the pitcher Frank Robinson said. The closer in a baseball game is responsible for pitching the final inning of the game most nights. Often, they are the one directly responsible for a heroic win or the team's late loss. Robinson was explaining that if you have a bad outing one night and you give up the game, being a great pitcher means forgetting about that last game and going back out the next night like nothing bad ever happened. Perhaps acquiring this sort of short-term memory is a good thing. Each morning at Boker Tov TBZ, we sing the words, Elohai nishama shenatata bi tehurahi. God, the soul you have given me is pure. I'm waking up with a clean slate, full of opportunity. Anything that happened yesterday, I don't remember. This day is full of possibility, and I can make it my own. This week's Parshat, V'etchanan, implores us to retain a long-term memory. Moses is in the midst of the epic farewell speech to the Israelites. He knows he will not be able to enter the land of Israel, and he uses this time to give strength and courage to his community. As a part of this speech, he recites the Ten Commandments, reminding the Israelites the terms of their sacred covenant with God. This telling or retelling of the mitzvot is almost identical to the way the commandments were revealed to the Israelites back in the book of Exodus. You might know, though, that the mitzvah instructing Israel to observe Shabbat is taught differently here. In Exodus, the Israelites are told to remember the Shabbat and keep it holy. Zechor et Yom HaShabbat. Et Yom HaShabbat. The reason is given there that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Therefore, Israelites should also rest on the seventh day and refrain from gathering manna that fell from the sky during their journey. There would be enough for them for Shabbat on Friday. Here, in Deuteronomy, Moses explains, keep the Shabbat and make it holy. Shamor et Yom HaShabbat. And the rationale is different. This telling also provides a new explanation. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe this Shabbat. Why two different versions for the same commandment? For a tradition that believes that each word of a command from God, each word of the Torah is essential. Did Moses forget what had been revealed back in Exodus? Of course, if you are a biblical commentator, this is an invitation to an interpretive field day. So perhaps the most famous interpretation of this discrepancy is outlined by Rashi. He quotes a midrash and teaches both of these terms, shamor and zachor, both of these instructions were spoken in one utterance and as one word. They were heard simultaneously. This is the explanation we know well because we sing about it each week. During Lecha Dodi, we sing, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. The words Shamor and Zachor were uttered together in one utterance. It teaches that both of these explanations are essential to the mitzvah, and they have to be heard together. That a commandment can have multiple interpretations. That we can hold this complexity, Shamor and Zachor, together. The commentator Chizkuni, a 13th century French scholar, gives a different explanation, though. He explains that the two mitzvot are spoken for very different purposes. He teaches, the expression Zachor means to remember. It was first used by Yaakov when Joseph related the dream to him in which the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. The word Shamor refers to a long-term memory. And that's why Joseph had to wait 22 years until the meaning of his dream came true later when he came to Egypt and became the right-hand man for Pharaoh. The meaning of Zachor, on the other hand, refers to remembering a short period of time. And then Chizkuni says it's possible that Zachor is addressed to people embarking on voyages at sea where they may lose track of time. But the expression Shamor is addressed to people living on dry land. There's something about the word zachor, which is about a short-term instability. But when we say shamor, as we do in this week's Parsha, it's about people on dry land who are trying to build a foundation, building a base for their society, ready to remember a long view of history. These two words refer to different periods of time in which a person must remember Shabbat. At the beginning of the Exodus story, the Israelites needed to remember that in their present they should not collect manna. But at this point, by the end of their journey, they remember Shabbat not only to guide them about their current practices, but to teach them about the significance of Shabbat in general. Shabbat is a revolutionary practice. It's an insistence that cycles of oppression cannot continue. It says, you were treated harshly as slaves by Pharaoh. You were on the brink of losing all hope. And then God heard your cries and freed you. Now, you have a sacred obligation to build societies that are anti-Pharaoh. Instead of working all the time under harsh circumstances or subjecting others to that cruelty, you will rest each week. You will ensure that anyone living with you will rest, that you'll rest together. And this Shabbat will remind you that you have an obligation to build societies in which no one experiences oppression. This extends beyond just Shabbat observance, but to all features of the society. Shabbat will inspire you to care for the most in need because you were in need. It will urge you to love the stranger because you were that stranger. According to Chizkuni, the word shamor, the word that's used in this week's Parsha, is about long-term remembering. It asks us to adopt a godlike quality and live a life that is beyond the simple here and now. This week, we observed Tisha B'Av, which was a practice in difficult, almost excruciating remembering. Now, as we emerge from that sad, dark place, we're asked not to forget our own experience of pain and oppression, not to box it up and put it away until next Tisha B'Av. Each Shabbat, we're inspired to remember that pain, and not only to remember it, but to mobilize it into a liberatory freedom for all. I love Shabbat, and I love baseball, but I love Shabbat because it's not baseball. Each Shabbat is built on the memory of the past. Each time I sing Lecha Dodi, I'm connected to all of the other times I prayed it. I'm connected to the generations of Jews who have sang it. I'm connected to the Israelites who sang crossing the sea on their way to freedom. And the commandment of Shamor et Yom HaShabbat, to remember, to keep this day of Shabbat, asks me not only to rest, but to rest up. To rest up so that I have the strength to use my long-term memory and build the kind of society in which none of us are truly strangers, in which all of us are home. Shabbat Shalom.